The wind had carved the snow into frozen ridges when Elsie found the tracks outside her cabin. Not hoofprints, not boots. Paws, wide and deep, circling the chicken coop, then trailing off toward the pines. She tightened her shawl around her shoulders and followed them without thinking, rifle loose in her grip. The tracks led past the dead orchard, past the stump where her husband used to chop wood, and stopped near the fence line. That's when she saw it. A coyote. Tall and lean, ribs showing, its right hind leg dragging slightly in the snow. But it didn't run. It just stood there, watching her. Not with hunger, not with fear, but something else. Like it knew her. She raised the rifle, just to scare it. But her fingers wouldn't squeeze the trigger. The coyote blinked, tilted its head, and turned away, limping slow back into the woods. She let it go. That night, the howling began. Not close, but not far either. Just a low, steady sound that came with the wind, curling around her windows like it was looking for a way in. Elsie sat by the stove with her knitting in her lap, eyes fixed on the fire, the same way she had for the past 3 winters since Daniel drowned. 3 years. No visitors, no children, no company but the mountains and her memories. She didn't believe in signs or spirits, but something about the coyote unsettled her in a way grief never had. The next morning she found it again, curled beneath her porch, breathing slow. It hadn't eaten. It hadn't left, just waited. She brought it a strip of venison jerky and set it near its paws. The coyote didn't lunge or growl. It simply looked up at her with eyes that burned amber like autumn leaves. Then it nudged the meat aside and pressed its muzzle gently to her boot. She gasped. The movement was so familiar. Daniel used to do the same thing when he came in from the cold. Kneel at her feet, rest his forehead there, as if the weight of the world melted in her presence. She backed away, heart thudding, but the coyote didn't follow. It simply lowered its head again and closed its eyes. Elsie stepped inside, latched the door, and leaned against it, breath shaky. It was just a coyote, wounded, lost, but something in her bones whispered otherwise. She hadn't felt this watched, this known since the day Daniel died. And the strangest part of all, she wasn't afraid. The next morning, Elsie rode into town for feed and salt blocks, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the coyote's eyes were still on her, even miles away. At the trading post, she moved like a ghost through the narrow aisles, filling her sack with flour and oats, but barely speaking. Jacob, the storekeep, raised an eyebrow when she handed over her coin. "You look like you saw a ghost, Elsie." She forced a smile. Something like that. As she turned to leave, a quiet voice from the corner stopped her. "It still follows you?" She froze. Sitting near the potbelly stove was an old Cherokee man wrapped in a gray wool coat, his eyes as sharp as winter stars. She'd seen him once before, when Daniel drowned and they'd searched the riverbank. He'd said nothing then, just nodded like he already knew. "You know about the coyote?" she asked. He nodded. "It's not just a coyote. So I've been told. By my bones, not by anyone else." He stood slowly, walked over, and opened a worn pouch. From it, he pulled a small bundle, ashes wrapped in a leather scrap, stitched with 2 symbols, one for protection, one for mourning. "That's a returned spirit," he said. "Old ones believe that when a man dies with the dead of the heart, and no kin to carry it, the spirit walks again, in flesh that remembers." Elsie's throat tightened. "You think it's Daniel?" The elder's eyes softened. "You already know it is." She didn't speak. Couldn't. The man tucked the pouch away and placed a hand on her shoulder. "He's not come to haunt. He's come to guard. But not just you." There's danger coming. Something from his past he never told you." She swallowed hard. "What kind of danger?" "The kind that hunts without a face. Men who wear law on their chests but rot in their hearts." "Bounty men?" she whispered. "Worse, men Daniel once called brothers." The elder stepped back. "If the Coyote trusts you, listen to him. There's still a fire in him, a fire that remembers everything." As she left the store, wind slicing down the street, Elsie felt the first sharp sting of fear. Not for herself, but for what she didn't know. What Daniel had kept from her. When she returned home, the Coyote was waiting at the gate, sitting like it belonged there. Like it had always belonged there. It stood when she approached and limped forward, brushing against her skirt. "You came back for something," she murmured. "Let's find out what." Snow fell lightly that night, dusting the pasture in silence. Elsie barely slept. She kept hearing soft scratching on the porch, not frantic, just steady, like the Coyote was pacing in a pattern only it understood. Before sunrise, she pulled on her coat and stepped outside. The Coyote sat beneath the porch rail, eyes trained on a patch of earth near the garden gate. It looked up at her, then back to the ground, and whined low in its throat. She followed its gaze. "What is it?" she asked softly. The dog, or whatever it was, scraped at the ground once, then stepped aside. She knelt and began to dig. The snow came off easily, and beneath it, the dirt was already disturbed. Her fingers brushed something hard, metal. She pulled out a collar, rusted and stiff with age. A small brass tag dangled from the center, covered in grime. She rubbed it clean. Her breath caught. The engraving was faint, but still visible. To Daniel. Walk with honor. It was the collar from his childhood dog, Boone. He'd buried it the day the dog died, long before she met him. He'd told her once, years ago, that the collar was the first gift he ever received with his name on it, that he wanted to be buried with it. And now here it was, dug up by a creature with the same silent, protective gaze. Elsie sat back on her heels, snow melting into her skirt, heart thundering. "Why did you bring this up?" The Coyote didn't answer, just walked to the barn and sat by the doors. When she followed, it pawed once at the boards near the back wall. Behind them, under old crates, she found a rotted saddlebag. Inside, a pistol, wrapped in cloth, and a stack of papers, maps, letters, and a small black book. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first page read, U.S. Territorial Marshals, Western Division, Daniel Cole. Her stomach turned cold. Daniel had never told her he was a marshal. Never. He'd claimed to be a ranch hand, said he hated lawmen and their noise. But here it was. Badges, names, lists of men wanted for arrest. Some crossed out, some circled. Her breath shortened. On the last page, in his careful script, he'd written, I only trust her. If something happens, she'll know what to do. Elsie looked up. The Coyote was watching her still. Not with the eyes of an animal, but of a man who knew what he'd left behind. And now, she was holding the key to it all. What did you do, Daniel? She whispered. And who's coming for it? The next day brought a strange stillness to the woods. No bird song, no wind, just the crunch of frost under Elsie's boots as she paced the edge of the yard. The Coyote never left her side. It moved differently now, closer, more alert, like it knew something she didn't. That afternoon, just as the light turned gold, a rider appeared on the far ridge. Not from town, not from any path she knew. He sat high in the saddle, coat flapping in the breeze, a rifle slung carelessly across his back. But what struck her was the lack of a star, no badge, no mark of law, just a scar that ran from his ear to his collarbone, visible even at a distance. The coyote let out a low growl, hair rising along its spine. "You know him?" Elsie murmured. She backed slowly toward the porch, never taking her eyes off the rider. He didn't approach, just watched. Then, with a flick of the reins, he turned and vanished into the trees. She didn't sleep that night. She read every page of Daniel's black book by lamplight, memorizing names and notes. The man with the scar was there, Silas March, former deputy-turned-bounty hunter, discharged for brutality. Daniel had circled his name twice. Underneath, "Don't let him find the ledger." The ledger? She tore through the saddlebags again. No ledger, no sign of anything like that. Maybe it was still buried. Maybe Daniel had hidden it somewhere else. The coyote whined from beside the fire, then walked over and pawed at the floorboards beneath the hearth. Elsie knelt, pried up a loose board, and there it was. A thick, weathered journal. The first page was addressed to her. "Elsie, if you're reading this, I ran out of time. The men I once rode with turned into something darker. I tried to burn the trail, but it always loops back. You'll need to finish it." Her fingers curled tight around the book. Daniel had been running from more than regret. He'd been protecting something, evidence, names, deals, corruption, the kind men would kill to keep buried. And now she held it. The coyote nudged her hand, eyes sharp. It wasn't just there for comfort. It had brought her here for a reason. She stroked its head, whispering, "All right, I'll see it through." Outside, snow began to fall again. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Silas March was still watching, still hunting. But this time, she wasn't the widow with nothing to lose. She was the keeper of a truth men feared. And she wasn't alone. By morning, Elsie had read enough of the ledger to understand why Daniel never spoke of his past. The entries were written in a firm, steady hand. His hand. And each page carried the weight of betrayal. Names of sheriffs who took bribes, marshals who turned men over to private contractors for bounty splits, towns where justice was sold in back rooms, then buried in shallow graves. One name kept repeating. Silas March. The man with the scar. The one she'd seen on the ridge. He hadn't just betrayed Daniel, he'd hunted him. The final entry chilled her to the bone. "If I fall before it's done, let the truth walk with her. She's the only one they won't see coming." Elsie sat in silence. The coyote curled at her feet as the fire popped softly behind them. She looked down at the animal. "You never left him, did you?" The coyote didn't blink, just leaned against her leg. A soft knock rattled the front door. Not urgent, not loud. She froze. No one ever knocked, not since the funeral. Rifle in hand, she crept towards the door and eased it open an inch. A young man stood on the porch, no hat, hands raised. His coat was thin for the weather, and snow dusted his shoulders. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I don't mean trouble. I was told to find you." "By who?" "By a man named Cole." Her throat tightened. "He's dead." "I know. He said if anything happened, I was to give you this." He reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. No seal, just her name, scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. She took it with shaking fingers and unfolded it. "If this boy made it to you, it means they're closing in. He's green, but he's loyal. Show him the ledger. Let him help you get it to Cherokee Bend. The elder there, John Littletree, knows what to do. Burn the copy. Keep moving. Don't trust anyone else." She looked up. "What's your name?" "Micah. Can you shoot?" He nodded. "Then grab a shovel. We've got work to do." That afternoon, she and Micah buried the saddlebag deep under the stone marker near the creek, marked it with nothing but a pile of pine cones. She made a copy of the most important pages from the ledger, tied them in oilskin, and stitched them into the hem of her riding cloak. The coyote watched them work, silent, ever near, and when the sun dipped low, they saddled up. "You ready?" she asked. Micah nodded. "Where are we going?" "To finish something Daniel started." The coyote led the way. The road to Cherokee Bend cut through dense forest and steep ridgelines, the kind of terrain only hunters and ghosts traveled. Elsie rode with the ledger pages sewn into her cloak and the coyote at her side, every step pressing the past deeper into her bones. Micah kept pace behind her, rifle strapped across his back, eyes sharp despite his youth. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. The weight of what they carried spoke loud enough. By dusk, they reached an old way station, just a slanting roof and rotted porch, but dry enough to take shelter. As they gathered kindling, Micah finally broke the silence. "You loved him. It wasn't a question." "I did," Elsie said, "but I didn't know him. Not all of him." "He didn't want you to." She turned. "How would you know?" Micah hesitated, then pulled a folded slip of paper from his satchel. "He wrote me one more note, said to wait until the first night on the road." She took it and unfolded it beneath the flickering firelight. The ink was rough, smeared by haste or pain. "Elsie, if he reaches you, it means I trusted him. I couldn't tell you everything while I lived. I was afraid I'd lose you. I lied when I said I left the Marshals by choice. I left because I wouldn't let them hang a Cherokee boy for a crime their own man committed. That's when they marked me. That boy's grandfather is Littletree. If I die, tell him I kept my word. I kept the fire." She lowered the note, slowly. "He died protecting someone else's truth," she whispered. Micah nodded. "And now it's ours." Outside, the wind howled. The coyote perked up, ears twitching toward the north. Elsie moved to the window. 3 riders at the edge of the trees. Still silhouettes, unmoving. "They followed us," she said. Micah stood beside her, calm. "You want me to run decoy?" "Number you ride straight to Littletree with the ledger. I'll slow them down." "You won't make it." "Doesn't matter." But before they could argue, the coyote growled and sprinted through the door, vanishing into the trees. Elsie turned, heart in her throat. "It's going to lead them away." "That thing's just an animal," Micah said. "No," Elsie said, eyes shining. "That's Daniel, one last time." And she believed it. Believed it the way you believe in fire when it's the only thing between you and the dark. "Ride, Micah," she said. "He's giving us a chance." Micah vanished down the ridge, his horse galloping hard into the trees, and Elsie stayed behind in the way station, her rifle resting across her knees, breath steady despite the storm in her chest. She listened. Not to silence, but to absence. No coyote. No hoofbeats. Just wind through brittle birch trees and the crackle of the dying fire. She didn't know how far Daniel's spirit could run. Only that he was buying them minutes, maybe more. She moved fast, grabbing the saddlebag with the decoy copy of the ledger, tucking it beneath the floorboards under the stove. Then she sprinkled lye and ash over it. If they found it, it would burn before they opened it. She stepped outside and knelt beside the birch tree just beyond the porch, knife in hand. On a sheet of bark, she carved 3 names: Daniel Cole, Micah, and her own. Below it, she scratched a message in Cherokee syllabary she had once seen Daniel write. He kept the fire. Now we carry it. She nailed it to the tree, in case Littletree ever came that way. A marker, a memory, a warning. Snow began to fall again, sharp, dry flakes that stung her cheeks. She heard the riders before she saw them. 3 silhouettes rode into the clearing like shadows come to life. At their front, Silas March. His face was drawn tight with cold and time, the scar down his cheek now pale as chalk. He dismounted without a word. The others flanked him, guns drawn. "You're a stubborn one, Mrs. Cole," Silas said. "That ledger could make trouble for a lot of respectable men." "Then maybe they ought not be respectable in name only. We ain't here to talk philosophy. Where is it?" "Gone. To Littletree?" She said nothing. Silas sighed and raised his revolver. "I didn't want it this way. Daniel was my brother once, but he forgot where his loyalty belonged." "No," Elsie said quietly. "He remembered. Just too late to save himself." A howl broke through the trees, raw, piercing, and close. Silas turned his head, just slightly, and that was her chance. Elsie fired. The bullet struck his shoulder, sent him spinning to the ground. She dove for cover as return fire shattered the porch post beside her. From the trees, the coyote lunged, fangs bared, fury unleashed. It tore into one of the gunmen before he could scream. Elsie ran, heart pounding, the rifle hot in her hands. This wasn't over. Not until she saw Micah safe. Not until Daniel's fire reached its final keeper. Micah rode hard through the canyon pass, snow blinding him, breath steaming in ragged gasps. The ledger pages stitched into his cloak felt heavier with every mile. He didn't know if Elsie was alive, didn't know if the coyote had survived the ambush. But he knew this: if he failed, Daniel's truth would vanish like smoke. By nightfall he reached Cherokee Bend. The old village sat tucked in the folds of pine and stone, half forgotten by maps, but never by memory. Lanterns glowed warm in windows. Smoke curled gently from chimneys. At the edge of the bend, standing beside a fire pit, was a tall elder in buckskin and braids streaked with gray. John Littletree. He didn't speak when Micah arrived, just stared into the flame like it had whispered his name. Micah dismounted and pulled the folded oilskin from his cloak. "He said you'd know what to do." Littletree took it without a word, held it close to the firelight, and began to read. His expression didn't change, but his eyes gleamed wet. "He remembered," he said finally, "right until the end." "He died for this," Micah said quietly, "and she stayed behind to make sure I got it to you." "She?" "His wife, Elsie." Littletree nodded slowly. "She carries strong fire." He turned to the fire pit and dropped the oilskin pages into the flames. Micah lunged forward. "What are you doing?" "Trusting the wind," Littletree said calmly. "I read them, and now no one else will. What I remember, I carry forward." "But the proof—" "The proof is in the telling. The old ways remember through voice, not paper." Micah stared, breath heavy. "Then what now?" Littletree stepped closer. "Now we prepare for the rider behind you. He won't stop just because words turned to ash." "Then let me fight." "You will, but not with bullets." Littletree turned toward the longhouse, where shapes moved, men and women of the village stepping out, silent but ready. "We send them a message they'll never forget." The wind shifted. A howl rose from the hills, weak, ragged, but alive. Littletree's head lifted. "He's still fighting." "The coyote?" "No," he said softly. "Daniel." And somewhere behind the storm, Micah knew Elsie was still alive, still running, still burning with something no bullet could kill. Tomorrow they would ride for her. But tonight they let the fire speak. Elsie ran until her legs buckled. She crawled behind a fallen log, fingers frozen around the rifle, lungs burning. The clearing was a mess of churned snow and blood, one rider dead, the other gone. Silas was wounded but not finished. She'd seen the fury in his eyes before she fled, the promise of revenge. The coyote had vanished into the trees, bleeding, but alive. She clung to that. Somewhere out there, Daniel still fought. She pressed her back against the log and waited. The wind shifted. A branch snapped behind her. Too close. She rolled and fired, the bullet cracking through the trees. A figure stepped into view, hands raised. "It's me," came the voice. "Micah." She blinked. "How? Littletree sent me. He says you're not done yet." She lowered the rifle, heart thudding. "You made it?" "We burned the copy. He remembers everything, and he's not alone." Behind Micah, a column of riders emerged from the trees. Cherokee men and women, armed and silent, moving like wind through pine. One of them helped her to her feet. "You're safe now," he said. "But not for long," she answered. "Silas is still out there." The lead rider nodded. "Then we end it." They moved through the trees in silence, flanking the ridge where Elsie last saw Silas. It didn't take long to find him. He stood in the hollow, clutching his wounded arm, face pale with fury. "You don't know when to quit," he snarled as they stepped into the clearing. "You lost, Cole, all of you." "No," Elsie said, rifle raised. "You lost the second you turned against the men you swore to stand beside." "I swore to survive." "So did Daniel." And he did. In us. Before he could fire, a howl echoed through the trees, close and sharp. The coyote lunged from the brush, fangs bared. Silas turned too late. The animal slammed into him, knocking him to the ground as Elsie fired once more. The shot struck true. Silence followed. The coyote staggered back, blood trailing from its side. Elsie dropped beside it, cradling its head. "Daniel," she whispered, tears hot in her eyes. The animal looked at her one last time, then rested its head in her lap, still. Littletree stepped forward. "He kept the fire." Elsie nodded, voice breaking. "And now we carry it." The wind swept through the trees, soft as a breath. The past was gone, but its story would burn in them forever. Elsie stood at the edge of the clearing as the first rays of dawn cast a golden glow across the fresh snow, the quiet aftermath of battle settling over the scarred land like a solemn promise. The field lay silent now, strewn with remnants of shattered hopes, a broken rifle, torn saddlebags, and scattered trinkets that spoke of a past no longer hidden. Nearby, the Cherokee warriors gathered in respectful silence, their eyes reflecting both sorrow and a steely resolve, while Micah helped tend to the wounded and salvaged what honor they could from the ruin. In the midst of this somber scene, Elsie knelt beside the lifeless form of the loyal Coyote, whose battered body still bore scars of its fierce defiance. Cradling the animal in her arms, she watched as its dark eyes slowly closed and a final, gentle sigh escaped its lips, as if bidding farewell from Daniel himself. In that quiet, heart-wrenching moment, the creature had done more than guard her. It had carried Daniel's spirit, igniting within her a flame of determination that would not soon be quenched. Though Littletree had reduced the incriminating ledger to ashes, its testimony of betrayal and steadfast loyalty continued to resonate in every ember of memory. Standing amid the remnants of conflict, Elsie recalled Daniel's whispered promises and the wise counsel of the Cherokee elder who had once assured her that a true legacy survives beyond death. Now she understood that the fire of truth, no matter how fiercely it was tried, could never be truly extinguished. It would continue to flicker in every act of defiance and every act of justice. With resolve hardening in her chest, she rose slowly from the cold ground, the weight of grief balanced by a newfound strength. Gathering the survivors close, Micah, the vigilant Cherokee, and others who had witnessed the reckoning, Elsie vowed to rebuild not only the shattered fragments of their homestead, but also the fractured bonds of honor and trust torn asunder by treachery. As the rising sun banished the remnants of night and cast hopeful shadows across the land, she mounted her horse, determination etched in every line of her face. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which the eternal ember of truth would guide them through the encroaching darkness, lighting a pathway toward redemption and a future forged in justice. With one last glance over the silent battlefield, Elsie spurred her mount forward, ready to carry Daniel's legacy into a dawn where every cruelty would be met with the unwavering spirit of those who refused to remain silent.